Perkins, and yes, I do want to introduce myself, not because they wouldn't do a really good job of it, but because I can make it a lot shorter. So I'm one of your circuit judges. I was an attorney here in this community for about 30 years, and then I decided to apply for the bench, and I was appointed to the bench 14 years ago, and I've been there since. I think I've got another year or two left in me. Maybe two left in me before I retire. So currently I sit in a criminal division, but I did civil practice as an attorney, and then I was in civil divisions as well. So what we have in mind this morning, and I'm going to introduce my fellow speakers in just a moment, but is a general discussion about the court system, not just here in Volusia County, but because Volusia is one of 4 counties in the 7th Circuit, the 7th Circuit generally. And to help me in that regard, we have an interesting mix, I think you'll find. So the first person I'm going to introduce, although she's not going to speak just yet, is Laura Roth. So what you probably know is that Ms. Roth is our clerk, the Clerk of Court here in Volusia County. And she didn't just fall into that position. She didn't wake up one morning and say, I'm just going to run for this without any experience or whatnot. She had years of experience in the clerk's office, this very office, essentially being the person that runs the office, that makes the day-to-day decisions. Not the elected clerk that, in that case, also made decisions. I don't mean to suggest that they didn't. But it's an elected position. In every organization, you have somebody that's actually making sure that the doors are open and the lights are on and the whatever, and that whatever you're doing is the correct way of doing it. And for years, that was Laura Roth. Now, she has a unique ability. Not only is she in charge of the clerk's office, so she is the clerk of court in that regard, and all that entails with regard to day-to-day legal procedures, but she's particularly suited for that because she is also an attorney. So she knows from that perspective what the attorneys need, and I think that's one of the reasons why she runs such an efficient office is she's got a little different insight from that perspective. So she was how long were you deputy clerk? You started, what, 2004?
Yes, started in 2004, chief deputy.
So you were just legal advisor? Okay. And then in 2011 is when you basically assumed all of the duties, and 2016 is when you're elected. Okay. And so that's kind of the details as to why we have her here. And I can tell you that she is looked up to around the state as a clerk in her organization. She's very involved in that, and also very effective, as you might imagine, with those credentials. But she's got a special place in my heart for a completely different reason, and I don't mean to embarrass her by this, but so right when she became the clerk of court, and for a little bit before that, she and I had discussions about what the court system should look like from a technology perspective. And she was able to plan and implement a system by which, as the then chief judge, I could go around to all of the other judges, some of the judges having been with us for 40 years, and say, young man, thank you, could I have that file? From now on, you'll do your work on this computer. Have a nice day, and left. And we've been doing it that way ever since, right? Ever since. And we thought we'd get this huge pushback, and it was the exact opposite. Those that we thought would be reluctant adapted to it very quickly. And what they found is that they could be much more efficient in that regard. And so it was actually a very, not only successful, but a very rewarding venture that we entered into. And I'm here to tell you that, but for the fact that we had a partner in the clerk system who is every bit attuned to efficiency and effectiveness, that never would have happened. She's sitting right here, and I think this is the first time I've ever been able to thank you publicly. All right, she's going going to talk a little bit today about funding of the court system, and we're going to hear that in just a little bit. The other co-speaker with us today is Circuit Judge Leah Case. So Judge Case has been an attorney, and I'm not going to tell you for how long, but she's been an attorney for a number of years. What I will tell you about that is she did both civil work, but she also did criminal work. And doing criminal work, she was one of the lead prosecutors in the state attorney's office, and she did the heavy lifting for years on really difficult, horrible cases. Sex cases, murder cases, all of that. I mean, it's one thing to be involved in them, it's one thing to see it, it's another one to be the main prosecutor, the person that's bringing these claims, the person that's talking to the family, that's going out in the middle of the night to meet with law enforcement at the scene, all of those kind of things. She did that for years, and that's part of her background. Now, she's currently in a criminal division right up the road here. She was appointed in 2010. We actually went up there together, and she's just renowned by her colleagues, I can tell you, as being kind of the epitome of what a circuit judge should be. She's decisive. Don't let her young appearance fool you. She's experienced, and she runs a taut ship, I am here to tell you. And I can tell you that because I was her neighbor for about 3.5 years, the 2 doors down from her in that regard. I think the most important thing I can tell you about Judge Case is that every 2 years, the judges elect one judge to become what we call the chief judge, that is the head administrative judge. Now, the head administrative judge is the judge that not only does their docket, but also is responsible to assign the docket to the other judges, assign cases to the other judges, decide where you're going to actually physically sit, where your office is going to be, where your courtroom is going to be, who your bailiff is going to be, your JA, everything. The chief judge is responsible for everything with regard to operation of our court system. Judge Case is our incoming chief judge. She will be starting her role officially as chief judge on July 1st of this year. It's a 2-year term, and traditionally we serve 2 2-year terms, so she's going to be stuck for 4 years. 2 2-year terms in that regard. But knowing Judge Case as I do, and as I've just described her to you, you know she's actively involved right now, planning exactly what's going on and getting ready to start officially come July 1. So I want to start first with a discussion by Judge Case a little bit about the 7th Circuit and kind of orienting you about the business of running a judicial circuit and what we do day to day in the court system. Judge Case.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. What a nice introduction. I appreciate that. My name is Leah Ramsbottom Case, and the reason I say the Ramsbottom is in case some of you may know my family. I grew up here. I went to Tomoka Elementary. I went to Ormond Junior, graduated from Seabreeze High School, went to college and law school at University of Florida, and came home, married, and raised 2 boys here. So I am very committed to our community. I'm very honored to serve you in the capacity as judge, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about what we do and the areas we have authority over. So this is a breakdown of the state of Florida, and we're divided into circuits, and there's 20 circuits, and we are the 7th Circuit. So the orange on the right there, the 7th Circuit. And so we have responsibility for 4 counties: St. John's, Volusia, Flagler, and Putnam. So as a circuit judge, Terry and I can be moved to St. John's, Volusia, Flagler, or Putnam County. We have the authority to adjudicate cases in all those counties. And Terry currently sits in Flagler County as a circuit judge. So that is our circuit, the 7th. And here are some of the courthouses that we have. The bottom left the bottom one is the DeLand Courthouse. I don't know if any of you have been in there. That's our newest courthouse. The top right is before the DeLand Courthouse was built. That was the courthouse we used. That's a ceremonial courthouse, but we also use it for big cases, like all the tobacco litigation was assigned to that courthouse because we had huge numbers of people and litigants. We used that courthouse. The left is the Flagler County Courthouse. That's where Terry is.
I snuck that in there.
I see that, yeah. All right. And then the 2 on the right are the east side courthouses. The top is the Foxman Center. That is named after Judge Jim Foxman. And that houses our criminal divisions. This is where I currently sit. So the circuit, the felony criminal divisions are in that courthouse, along with the state attorneys, the public defender's office, and our criminal clerks are in there. The lower picture is the annex where I was for 3 years. A year ago, I was in the civil division, circuit civil division, doing tobacco cases. And that houses a mix. We have civil circuit, we have the family law. When I was in dependency, I served on the dependency bench, and that's where DCF is involved, and you are dealing with children that have been abused, abandoned, or neglected. The juvenile delinquency system is in there, and all the county judges on the east side. Now, county judges, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but county judges have jurisdiction only in the county where they were elected. So our county judges are in this building for Volusia County for the east side and the DeLand Courthouse for the west side. All right, and we have 44 judges and judicial assistants. I don't know, some of you might know Judge Raul Zambrano. He was our chief a few years ago, but that's just a picture of all us. And were you getting sworn in there, or were you swearing in Clayton?
I was swearing in Don Nichols.
Oh, Don Nichols, okay.
See the bald guy? That's Jim Clayton.
Yeah.
He's our current chief judge and a close person.
Good guy. All right, so here's some numbers, and Laura will talk to you about this. This is the 7th Circuit case filings by fiscal year, and actually Judge Perkins did this a while ago to try to get an idea of what the numbers were. So it was from fiscal year 03 to 2015, and you have it broken down by type. So the first row is circuit criminal, 8,101 filings in 2015. So that was your criminal. Then family, 13, and then you go down there, it's 137,000. Now, did we decide that this was just Volusia?
Volusia.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Volusia. This is not the, so just in Volusia County, in 2015, we had 137,000 case filings between everything. But we have a way to break them down so we can keep track of the workload and where our resources need to be. The state of Florida, case filings by fiscal year, 3,352,000. So it's a lot of work. A lot of cases are going through the system.
So I've got a test question. If you look at FY07, fiscal year 07 at the top, and you come down to where it says total, it says 158,739. Everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
The next column, 170,747 for fiscal year 08. Fiscal year '09, 170,825. Fiscal year 2010, 160,976. Went real high. You can look at the numbers before, you can look at the numbers after. For that period, it went real high, off the charts, high. Why? Anyone know?
Real estate.
Bingo, right? And little old Flagler County, remember, it was ground zero in the United States for the number of foreclosures per capita.
So we had to, actually, we had so much, especially in Flagler County, that we got a special influx of some funding to bring in the senior judges to try to help with the foreclosures, because there just wasn't enough judges to get everything done. The 127,000, that is the number of cases last year in Volusia County. So in Volusia County, 127,000 cases we handled, or resolved. Resolved, yeah. All right, jury trials, my favorite thing to talk about. I was a trial lawyer for a long time. I've been a lawyer for, I'll tell you, 28 years. And jury trials are my passion. I love them, and I try to make sure all the jurors love them by the time they're done with in front of me. We have about 1,000 people a week coming to the courthouses to participate in jury selection. And as you can imagine, it is a room full of people that are not smiling like all of you. So when we go down there, I think it was Judge Perkins who instituted this, the judges go down there to greet the jurors, so it's not just jury management. We go down there and talk to them. And we try to tell them, we understand this is not convenient. It is not convenient, nobody wants to be here. Very rarely do I get somebody that wants to be here. But we explain to them that without the jurors, we can't get business done. Nothing gets done without the jurors. And what I like to do is I talk about people who have served in the military, and now it's young, loved ones, family. Tell me about that. Who served in the military? How long? And then I'll say something like, guess what? I'm not asking you for 4, 8, 10, 25 years. I'm asking you for 3 days or 2 days or whatever. To try to lighten it up and put in perspective that this is a duty. This is a responsibility we have as a U.S. citizen. 2 things we have to do: pay taxes and serve as a juror. That's it. We have these people that are volunteering to put their life on the line to protect our country and to defend our country. We can serve as jurors. But I also talk about, I really think, I've been doing this for a long time, and 90% of the people have a good experience. I'm not saying it's pleasant. I had a very disturbing case 2 weeks ago, the death, murder of a 3-month-old child. That was not pleasant by anybody's definition. I think every single one of those jurors respected and appreciated the process and walked away with, I feel good about the process. And I asked them to call me afterwards if they didn't, so that they can let me know. What can we do different to make things better or easier for you, So jury trials is my thing. And I feel like I'm sad when somebody says they've never served as a juror, because I think that is a really good experience and eye-opening. And just let me get a sense, sometimes I'm wrong, so we can see, how many people have served as a juror and actually went through the process? Okay, so that's great.
Called or actually served?
Called, okay. And how many people actually went through deliberation and came back with a verdict? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, how many people of those, how many felt like they either learned something or they felt good about the process? Not necessarily the case, because it can be disturbing, but how many felt good about the process or that they learned something? Okay, might be easier. Who didn't feel good about the process? 1? Okay, and I'd like to talk to you about that later, but 1 person here out of all those people, I think that says something about our judicial system. I really do.
Let me share one other thing. One of the assignments the chief judge gets to do customarily is pick a grand jury. So a grand jury is different than a petit jury that actually hears a case and decides guilt or innocence, or a civil case enters a judgment or whatever. The grand jury has one job and one job only, and that's to determine probable cause for criminal charges. Now, some states, they use the grand jury for everything. In the state of Florida, we use it primarily for one purpose and one purpose only: premeditated first-degree murder. So we pick a jury, a grand jury. The grand jury sits for 6 months. The grand jury may never be called. No first-degree murders going on in your community, they may never be called. But when you need them, you need them. They have to be there. So one thing I'll share, and as chief judge, I had the opportunity, and I exercised the opportunity to pick the grand jury every time in each of our 4 counties. So you were able to establish a rapport with those folks. But I'll tell you a story about that, and that is, when you go to pick the grand jury, when the people come in, our citizens don't know that they're there for a grand jury. They just think they're showing up for jury duty like anything else. They don't know that it's grand jury, or that the grand jury is a little special in that regard. And we read them instructions that date back literally over a century. They're coolest instructions that we have that we get to read. But I'll share with you that we have the same reluctance to serve on the grand jury that we do from folks on regular juries. So it's not uncommon. You'll have someone come in: I'm a businessman, I'm too busy, I'm too important, I can't spend my time doing this, etc., etc. You see that. But within a grand jury, every once in a while, you'll have that person. They get selected. They are now on the grand jury. They then go off and they receive a presentment from the state attorney's office with regard to the facts of a specific case. It's an abbreviated presentment. They don't go through every witness and every issue, but they typically hear from the detectives, from the forensic people. They may see photographs, they may hear about fingerprints and blood splatter and all of this other stuff. And they come out of that, and then the judge receives their presentment. We call that an indictment, but the judge is the one that actually receives the indictment. So you have this one person, you can see them because you just selected them. They're on the jury, they don't want to be there, they got a bad attitude, they're too busy and too important for you, and they go for this presentment, and they come back and their eyes are the size of saucers. And they can't wait to get to the next one. Can we do another one while we're here? Is there something else we can do? Can I help you around the courthouse? So it can actually be an extremely rewarding experience, but I'm here to tell you there's no community service that's more important than either of those juries in that regard. And I hope those that you haven't served, I hope you have that opportunity. Sorry.
Thank you. No, I'm glad you said that. All right, the next one. We talked about, and I didn't really tell you, I guess I should, the circuit judges, criminal, do felony crimes. So that, murders, rapes, burglaries, robberies, felony drug stuff. The county judges, criminal, do misdemeanors, which are your DUI, your domestic battery, your assaults, things like that. Your circuit civil, what is is it 50,000 now? The cutoff, 50,000? So circuit civil, do all cases, civil business disputes or car accidents or medical malpractice, anything 50,000 or above. The county civil, do those cases if it's under 50,000. That's how the split up is. But we also have some specialty courts, and I think these are really important. They're good for the community to understand. We have what's called drug court, and there's one in each county. And the purpose and the goal of the drug court is to be able to take a certain amount of the criminal population that commit crimes, nonviolent crimes, due to drug use, and funnel them into a court that has the time and the special resources to try to deal with the drug problem, with the addiction. Because our criminal courts are not rehabilitation. The legislature has said we are punishment only. We don't have a rehabilitation function. So the specialty courts kind of serve that. So you funnel these people into a specialty court, drug court, that they have the community programs, the drug, the drug knowledge of addiction, the therapists, the programs, the services of why people sometimes start in drugs. You know, they have the ability to try to get those people out of the addiction. Are you 100% successful? No. But they have a good success rate with the people that graduate from drug court who do not go back and commit crimes. And they study that for a certain amount of time. How long do we keep these people from recommitting your grand thefts, your car burglary, stuff like that, because they want money for drugs? So this is a very important function of our court system, but it has to be funded. So the legislature has to decide they're going to put money to do this. And so that's always a debate. What we're getting, is it worth all the resources that are going in? So that's a constant debate and why we keep track of data and numbers. And we have one we're lucky we have one in each county. Digital reporting. We have gone to digital reporting in every kind of criminal case, except for life or capital felonies, murder cases, or anything punishable by life, like armed trafficking of drugs or capital sexual battery. And this took a lot of collaboration and funding to try to get recordings in all the courtrooms and the microphones and all of that. We still have some hiccups, like when I pick a big jury, when I have 50 people in there to try to get a 12-person jury, I still need to pass mics around because our courtrooms aren't wired all the way for sound yet, because they were built way before this time. We had stenographers, you know, physical court reporters. Well, one of the reasons we did this was because you can't get stenographers anymore. There's a huge shortage. Even when I have a murder case and I need a physical stenographer because we're not allowed to digitally record it, you know, we're fighting with everybody to try to get a physical person in there. They really, they have dwindled. So we're very lucky that we have digital recording and the ability to record our trials. Oh, this is the other, I'm very happy to say we have a veterans court. We have two, right? Here in Volusia and one in St. John's. Because we don't have funding for more right now. To me, this is so important. I had one of the first felony cases to go into veterans court, because we didn't put felons in there, people that committed felons. And I had a guy, and I was very nervous about doing this. I had a guy who had gotten back from serving his country 2 tours. He had a traumatic brain injury, had PTSD, and he was having some issues coming back. He held his wife hostage with a gun for hours. There was a police standoff. There were some other details in the case. I don't want to say too much because I'm not supposed to talk really about specifics of cases. But we all felt strongly that this would not have happened but for some mental issues he was dealing with and his TBI from the war, from his service to our country. And his wife felt the same way. She didn't want to prosecute, but I had the case in front of me. So I'm a criminal judge. You're looking at 30 years state prison with that kind of an offense. You're holding somebody at gunpoint. The police are coming. It's a standoff. You're endangering the neighbors, everything. But he was a veteran. So I took the chance with the agreement of some people and put them in Veterans Court. They have the resources, the community efforts, the therapist, and they took care of them. And you're on probation. The Veterans Court judge has jurisdiction over you, and he's a complete success. I mean, just really got his life back on track, and he is going to, he has to do with certain things, but if we didn't have that, what was I gonna do with that person? What do you do with that person? Do I put him on probation? I don't have the ability to make sure he gets the kind of help he needs on probation. So what do? Put him in prison for, 10 years? That's not doing anybody any good. So I have a soft spot in my heart for this. I want all veterans to be able to get the help that they deserve, and I feel like Veterans Court does that.
Does anybody recognize Dave Beck, the one in the white shirt right in the middle there?
I didn't even see him. Does
Anyone
anybody know Dave
Judge
Beck? He was a judge here, and he's the one that brought Veterans Court. He's a veteran. He was a judge here for a long time. He died, unfortunately, due to an illness, but everybody loved him. Everybody loved him, and he's the one that brought Veterans Court to our 7th Circuit.
And a veteran.
Unified Family Court. This is great, but it was also something that hurt us as far as personnel. But it's best for the litigants. Unified Family Court. When I was doing dependency, so I would have parents in front of me, or one parent in front of me who allegedly abused, abandoned, or neglected their kids. I would have no idea what was going on with that kid criminal-wise. If they were getting in criminal trouble, I would have to rely on people to tell me. The parents, if they were in criminal trouble, if they were getting a divorce, what was going on, because everything was spread out. It could be different courthouses. Unified Family Court, what they decided was that anything to do with the family would be handled together in front of the family judge. So they are aware of the entire family dynamic. Injunctions, before you get into a divorce, if you have injunctions and then later you have a divorce, all of that's going to be handled by the same judge. And it really is best for the family for that to happen, to have one person that has access to all the information and all the different courts that might be going on. It is hard for us because we used to split up or divide that labor between different judges, so the family judges bear the brunt of that. They have a tremendous responsibility, but I believe that is for the best for the litigants. Pretrial release in criminal cases. What this is, our court admin runs a program where, and it'll be the next slide too, I think it tells you about a risk assessment. When somebody gets arrested, there's a risk assessment done, and the first appearance judge is determining what to do with that person. As far as what kind of bail, they have to find probable cause for their arrest and set a bond or put them on pretrial release. Pretrial release is, we're not gonna make you pay a bond, I'm just gonna release you. You're gonna go back home and you've gotta check in with this organization, pretrial release. You use this risk assessment tool they do to kind of tell you who's at risk for fleeing, not coming back to court or whatever, and who's not. So we do that at first appearances. When the judges go out there, we're looking at people that were just arrested in the last 24 hours. We look at the charge, because that can dictate what kind of bond you get. Then we're looking at this risk assessment tool, and we are then setting a bond or releasing you to pretrial services. And they monitor you. They have you come in once a week or once a month. They phone you. And they have, I think Mark just said, 97% success rate as far as people coming to court, not missing, not failing to appear when they're on pretrial release. So that's huge, because what that does is that gets people out of our county jail, so we don't have to build another jail. But you're getting the people out that aren't, you hope, aren't a risk to not come to court and not a risk to hurt somebody when they're out. It's a very hard decision to make when you're a judge sitting there and you don't know much. All you got is an arrest report, and you got to decide, is this person a danger or whatever. So that's the pretrial release is a great tool. It keeps the cost down for the community and ensures that the people we feel are responsible and will come to court don't have to sit in jail.
Has anybody ever been to first appearance? I had neither when I did my first appearance, my very first appearance as a judge. So I went out there, and much to my shock, there were about 90 people that had been arrested in that previous 24 hours. 90 people, 90 of our fellow citizens. They're all dressed in orange. Unfortunately, they look like you and me. I mean, I was expecting they would have, maybe a C on their head or, some horns would be good. Nothing like that. Okay? And so you have a woman who's about 5 foot tall, who is alleged in the arrest report, because you have that, to have just beat the tar out of her husband, right? To the point that she broke his arm, right? And you got pictures that shows bruises and all kind of things that the police took at 3 o'clock in the morning. And here she is before you. And the last thing she said to her husband of 12 years, her husband, before she left, is, I'm going to get out of jail and I'm going to come back and put a bullet in your head, right? She has a constitutional right to bail. Non-monetary bail if you can do it. A constitutional right. You can't say, I'm going to hold you. That's not an option. That's not on the table. What do you do? What do you do with that? Where do you get that information? That's what we have. We have that now. Risk assessment and pretrial to make sure she shows up for her hearings, that she's passing drug and alcohol testing. She's doing all of the things you think she needs to do to stay clean and sober and non-violent until you see her again, right?
Yes, that's right. And most of the time it works, sometimes it doesn't. Because at the end of the day, it's just a court order. You don't have any firearms. You don't go near that person. You don't have contact with that person. I mean, it's not like we have somebody there monitoring them at their house. This is just a court order. People break court orders all the time. They violate injunctions. They violate their pretrial release. But you hope that, and I think with our 97% success rate on that, we are getting pretty good at figuring out who we can safely let out and who we cannot.
All right, very good. Thank you, Judge Case. All right, I'm next going to introduce our clerk, Laura Roth, and she's going to talk to us about funding the court system to put what she's about to tell you in perspective. So if you look at the state budget for 2023, and it, as only the state can do, and again, I ran my own business for 30 years, so I get to make snarky comments like that, but as only the state can do, they don't run their budget from January 1 to December 31. It would be way too easy to do that, and then everyone could compare their budget to the state budget. No, they run it from July 1 to June 30th. I'm sure there's a good reason, but I don't know what that is. In any event, if you look at the current state budget is $110 billion with a B dollars. It's a lot of money. It's a big state. We do a lot of things. That's a lot of money. The court system. Remember, we have 3 branches of government, right? The executive, it's headed by the governor. The legislative, House and Senate, and all the committees and whatnot for that. And the judicial. 3 separate branches of government. The judicial branch, total, everything. And I'm talking everything we do, every employee, every benefit, every piece of paper or scrap of paper that we use, totals $637.8 million. That's a huge amount of money. $638 million. It's It is a 0.6% of the state budget. We are less than 1% of the state budget. 0.6% of the state budget. Okay, and with that, we bring up our Clerk of Court, Laura Roth.
Okay, that's right, you'll help me with my slides, right? Hi, everybody.
Everybody's got their glasses, I hope.
I know, right? These are small numbers, but we'll talk about them. Okay, we'll get to it. So, thank you, by the way, for the acknowledgement about the transition to the electronic record. Because I always tell people, the clerk's office had been digitized with the documents for a really long time when Judge Perkins became chief judge, and he is the one that then talked all the other judges and mandated that all the other judges start to use the electronic record. So we had never been able to achieve the efficiencies in converting to electronic records without his insistence to do that, so I appreciate you for that as well. Okay, it's really important to keep in mind when we start talking about these numbers and this money, what Judge Perkins said, that keep in mind that the total cost of the judicial branch is less than 1% of the state budget. And that's good to keep in mind because there's some pretty big numbers I'm gonna throw at you, okay? So when you really look at what kind of dollars we're talking to run this system, it is quite a bit. I might be looking at let's see which fiscal year I'm looking at. Because my numbers were a little bit different than yours. But for the 22, okay, that's why. So for the 22-23 budget year, the state court's total budget was $678.9 million. Okay, and then I'm gonna break that down further for you for a minute. But another thing to keep in mind besides the fact, okay, where is it? I'm not loud enough.
We really want to hear every
Okay.
single word.
Do you guys know which one's, does anybody know where one is?
Probably.
That one will
Is
work.
it this one? Let's see if this one works.
Thank you so much.
No worries. I'm used to being loud, but I guess not.
You need to turn
Can
it
anybody
on.
help me?
It's not plugged in.
Yeah, this isn't looking like.
There you go. It's on.
It's a sign of aging. I used to be so loud I didn't need it. How's that? Is
That
good?
one's on too if you need it.
Okay, so the point in this slide is to tell you something else. Besides it only being less than 1% of the total budget, you have to understand too that today you have Judge Perkins and Judge Case in front of you, and they are circuit court judges. And we talked about the fact there are county and circuit court judges, right? But that's not all that comprises the judicial system for the state of Florida. That's just one piece. See the very bottom two rows there? That indicates that those are the numbers, that's the amount of funding required for the trial courts. So they are considered trial court level judges. Besides that, if you go up a couple rows, you'll see that there's quite a bit of money allocated there for the Florida Supreme Court. So even though this is all in the Florida court system, those are different layers of courts with different buildings, different administration, different levels. So you've got the trial courts, and they have the money they need, the Supreme Court, and then above that, you'll see the Judicial Qualifications Commission, and that's an important body that's part of the court system that qualifies judges and makes sure we get the right types of judges and holds people accountable. And then you have the District Courts of Appeal. So that's a whole nother layer of courts when people appeal from the trial court level. So if I had a case in front of Judge Case, let's say, and someone doesn't agree with the ruling, you could appeal it then up to the District Court of Appeal, okay? So that's a whole nother set of courts that needs money. And then the state court system, the administration of it is that top line. And so you see there, that's how it breaks down as far as the different levels of courts that are being funded. How do I go to the next one?
Just push the
Just
space
click it?
bar.
Okay,
Space bar.
space bar will take you. Thank you, that's easy. Okay, now this is that same chart, but now I'm gonna break it down into, you see there are two columns of numbers here. And the reason this is relevant is I believe one of your questions to Judge Perkins, when you invited him to speak, was asking, so tell me if I'm wrong, but are you guys interested in this, is where do the actual court costs, fines, and fees that are assessed in court to citizens? If you go to court, you want to get a divorce, I'm going to charge you $400 roughly to file that. Or if you went to a criminal case, you may get assessed fines. We may say, besides your sentence, you need to pay $5,000 in fines. So I think one of your questions is, where does that money go? Is that correct? Okay, so to be able to talk to you about that, we just have to all understand one concept really firmly. So let me walk you through it. There are two revenue sources for the state courts system, including clerks, because we're separate, believe it or not. We're integrated, but we're funded separately. So there are two funding sources for the state court system, and only two. One is called general revenue, GR. Familiar with that? It's state general revenue. Is everybody comfortable with what state general revenue is? So that's the sales tax dollars in every way that the state generates revenue, and they put it in a big pile called general revenue. And then every year, of course, they have to decide this much goes to this agency, et cetera. They break down that general revenue. So the largest funding source for the state court system, not the clerk's offices, the largest funding source for them is right from general revenue, okay? That has nothing to do with your fines, fees, costs, none of that. So when somebody's paying a traffic ticket or paying off a fine, that's not where that money comes from. So they have a large dedicated funding stream from general revenue of, well, their total is 678. The general revenue funding stream is 559.3 million. So the lion's share of their budget, 559.3 million of it comes from GR. The other funding, because remember we told you in the beginning, they actually have a total of 678 million. So where's the rest of it come from? The rest of it comes from trust fund money, and that's that second column. You see where it says S, I don't know if you can see it, it's small, but it says SCRTF, State Court Revenue Trust Fund. So now you can see broken down by different court level. Let's just stick with the trial courts where the two judges and myself work and play in the trial court level. So if we look at that, in 22-23, for the circuit courts, 441 million, etc. 441 million came from GR, general revenue, whereas 65 million came from the state court trust fund. That's your fines, fees, costs, okay? So that's the money citizens pay. That's how much of the trial courts that they supplemented with people paying from their pocket that are in the court system. For the county courts, 117 million came from GR, another almost 7 million came from the state court trust funds. Is everybody with me? Two revenue sources, GR, state court trust funds. So that'll take us to our next slide. So this, because I did understand that you all were curious about where do fines, fees, court costs, those types of things that citizens pay that are involved in the court system, where do they go? This gives you a more detailed breakdown of the types of places it goes. Now I have a general statement, let me tell you this. Their trust fund distributions only make up about 17% of the total budget. You see the GR portion's way bigger, right? So it makes up about 17%. And where it goes generally is the state court's revenue trust fund is used to fund salary and benefits of the Supreme Court, the district courts of appeal, the trial courts, the county courts, and the administrative staff, as well as for expenses like office supplies, printers, etc., data processing services of almost $500,000, compensation to retired judges, and mediation and arbitration services. This helps fund the court's 4,506 total full-time employees. So for just on the state court system side, there are 4,500 employees roughly. So this chart here just gives you a detailed breakdown, there it is, of the types of things. And it breaks it down by general revenue is that first column. You see most of the numbers are there. You have to go over to that trust fund column to see where your fines, fees, and court costs are going. So I'll just read you the titles of some of the places they are spent. Trust fund money is spent to supplement GR in communications. So that would probably be a little technology expenses, which are expensive. Contracted services, whatever services they have to contract for. Equipment rental. We have one that says this is largely their taxes, FICA and retirement, other contributions required by law. That's $12 million worth of that coming out of that trust fund from fines, fees, and court costs. Insurance contributions, another $16 million coming out of the trust fund. Other current charges and obligations, I don't know what that is. We have other personal services. I can't really explain what that is. Postage and freight, printing and reproduction, property rental, refunds, repairs and maintenance, salary and wages, there's the big one. Look at this one, salary and wages for the total court system, 272 million comes out of GR, another 62 million supplements that out of the trust funds. So if the court system had no fines, fees, service charges, if we cleansed it of citizens having any obligation to spend money, to be in court, or to be fined money as part of criminal charges, then that money would be lost. So it supplements even their pay, okay? So they're quite reliant on it. Now, not near as much as the clerks of court are, because our situation's a little different. So my last slide on this will show you, okay, this is one of my favorite graphics in the universe because it just explains it all. So on this one, you'll see that pie there is the total amount of revenue coming in from fines, fees, and court costs. So if you look for, this is a year back, because we're not finished with this fiscal year, so I cannot share with you the current numbers. But the most recent we have total numbers is, of course, from 21-22 fiscal year. So in that fiscal year, you can see there those numbers of the total that was brought in, and then it breaks it down by where they are going. So fines, fees, court costs, one thing that they are constitutionally obligated to do with fines, fees, court costs is fund the clerks of court. Because we're a close partner with the judiciary and actually technically part of the judicial system, that we are not funded by GR. So clerks of court are in an interesting position where we are not given a general revenue budget whatsoever. Okay, so that's why you see us taking up most of the fines, fees, and costs, because the Constitution says the clerk of court shall be adequately funded by adequate filing fees, costs, etc. So a lot of the money generation that's going on through the court system is to pay for the clerks of court. So that is our sole revenue source. We get 0 GR, and we have a total of 435.9 million. So it's basically a system of raise your own money. So that's how we work. It's much more like a business, but with some nasty little twists that make it difficult. So anyway, that's the clerk of court portion. You see up there where it says state court 79.8 million. Who's that? The judicial system. So that's that trust fund money. Remember when we had the charts and I told you they got this much from GR, but they also got this much from the trust fund. That's monies that clerks of court collected, turned over, and then they're then distributed to them instead, to the court system, which is fine with me because it's all still in the system. You see another sliver up there says the public defender. So a small amount, they don't have the biggest portion here. I think they might have one of the smaller portions, but the public defender is supplemented by their GR budget. They have a big GR, general revenue budget behind the scenes. This is just the trust fund. They get 18.2 million out of the trust fund. The state attorney's office, RJ Larissa, state attorney's office, 25.7 million in trust fund monies. These are from court costs, fines, and fees. They also have a much larger general revenue budget behind the scenes. Then, these last two pie pieces are my concern, and this is where we do have a current battle going on with clerks of court. Because like I said, we're funded solely from the filing fees. I have no general revenue guarantee. So imagine when a hurricane happens and all the fees stop coming in for a week. We get really nervous, you know? It's odd to not know if you're gonna make payroll as a government agency, part of a branch of government. So I don't appreciate the experience. I don't love our funding model, if I'm honest. Now, what we're working on right now is those last two pie pieces, to me, hold the key to a lot of this. You see that 143.5 million of court costs, fines, and fees from the court system goes to general revenue. Isn't that exciting? So not only do I not have a general revenue budget that's stable, we give, when we're bringing this money in, even though I don't have enough to cover my expenses, we still have to hand over that much of it to general revenue. Just saying. And then under that, you see where it says state trust funds? We, as clerks, had to turn over $100 million to an assorted group of state trust funds, which we've conveniently highlighted for you on the right. Those are the trust funds that got that $100 million. Well, I can't well fund my employees. So you see, I'm slightly annoyed by the situation. So what's occurred is, and I asked permission if this was okay to say, so I appreciate y'all's tolerance of this. I am gonna do a shameless plug because I'm desperate at this point. Clerks have had a flat budget because those fees don't change. Filing fees don't go up. So we've had the same amount of pie lingering around more or less, usually less, for about 12 years now. Okay, so do you guys know the increase in how much it costs to hire someone how much pay has increased 12 years ago? Can you even picture? And our costs and our benefits costs, and we've had to absorb it all in a flat budget. So if I have the same $10 million year after year and my costs are escalating like that, what did I have to do to make it work? Lay off people, combine departments. I've got I won't even go into it. We've done a lot of combining, and I've got lots of missing positions and combined. So clerks are in a little bit of a hurting. It's really come to a head this year because I've cut 120 positions since the foreclosure crisis to deal with this. And I'm really left with no one left to cut, and there's still no hope of more funding. So we did go up to the legislature very strongly this year. I just got back Thursday night. And we are advocating very strongly for a rescue. And what we're asking is simply, I don't want to take any other court partner's share of this pie. I think they put it to good use, don't you guys? It seems like they do. I'm not interested in hurting the state attorney, public defender, or anyone else. But I'm not so fond of the GR and the state rep, state trust fund portions there, and I think some of that could be redirected back to clerks like the Constitution says we should be adequately funded. So lucky us right now, please bear my shameless plug, we do have 2 bills pending. So we have a bill filed in the House and in the Senate. It's the most progress we've made in quite some time. We are praying they will come through. They are House Bill 977 and Senate Bill 1130. So House Bill 977 sponsored by Representative Botana, and then Senate Bill 1130 sponsored by Senator Hudson. So those are our bills that have been filed. They are non-political in nature. We have bipartisan support. We passed our first committee stop unanimously, and with a very vocal committee saying that we've got to fix this. So we feel like we're in our last year where this is just not gonna work anymore for us, and I feel like the court system's threatened. So if anybody ever asks you, would you support the clerks getting increased funding? Please, please. And if you question it and think we don't need it, come visit me. I will take you on a tour to meet my employees, and we will convince you. We have over 1,000 statutory duties. Anyway, it was wonderful to talk to you all. I think that's about all I have to say about fines and fees. I hope that was helpful.
Okay, you got to talk about what's important to you, I get to talk about what's fun to me. So let me first say that we're moving right along. I'm gonna be the final presenter here, but I don't wanna be the person standing between you and your lunch. So you have lunch, please eat it as we talk. As you can see, I have no problems talking over your lunch in that regard. But these are kind of some of the fun issues to talk about. So let me start first with court technology, because when I became a judge, we had files. We had paper files. We had boxes of paper files. The poor state attorney that would come in would have a cart full of paper files, hundreds of paper files. So think about just the cost of maintaining that. And now think about how many of those you're gonna close every year. I've already shown you we're closing 127,000 cases. That's 127,000 files every year. It goes back all the way. So think about just the cost. And where do you put that stuff? A lot of it has to be accessible. So you put it in the courthouse? Is that really the best use of our money, is to pay for storage in the courthouse in a secured facility for all of the documents, etc.? When you can probably take a whole year's worth of those cases and put them on a flash drive this big, right? Why not use that technology? So we thought that seemed like a good idea, and there were many that thought that we were crazy when Laura Roth and I started proposing this to them. And so our first step in the process was, let's go ahead and start to look at the files electronically and store the files electronically as opposed to paper. Okay, we're not gonna make any other changes, it's not gonna be any different, but instead of looking at a paper file, you're gonna look at a computer screen, right? Not exactly blasphemous, is it? Nice, easy thing. You'd be shocked at how many people would tell you, well, we've never done it like this before. I got so sick of hearing that. Now, let's take the next step. The next step is, how many of you still write letters? Not so much. Yeah, what do? You email, right? Email. Why don't we institute email? Let's make email the primary way of communicating with the court, between the judges, etc., right? You can keep it, you can maintain it, but again, it all goes on a flash drive this big, right? We don't have to store it and put it in a file and all that. We got that done. So let's fast forward. We started this process, I want to say in 2006, 2007. We got better at it. We're really good at it now. So sitting on my desk right now is a program that allows me to look at every case file, to look at any pleading I want to, anywhere I am. I can look at them right now on my phone, right? So, you know, the old saying they used to tell us as a lawyer is when they tell you you can work from anywhere, what that means is that you will work from everywhere. In the middle of your vacation, in the middle of the night, you will work from everywhere. That's true now for the judicial branch as well. And I caused some of that to happen, and I take responsibility for that, but it's a better way of doing it. So we digitized all of the pleadings and the files. We made them accessible. This is what it used to look like. So we made it accessible now, so we can actually use that information. We put it in such a way that you can copy it and use it moving forward, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, if you will, for every form and every document. We can now access those documents electronically. From my computer desk, I can schedule, I can sign it right now. Right now, I can put you in prison. I can sign this order right here, right now. We can do it, and I can do it from my phone. We can do anything we used to be able to do sitting in the court with all of the bells and whistles, and we can do it more securely, more efficiently, and more effectively, right now. Okay, and let me give you an example of something. This was a lot harder than I thought it was gonna be. So, we have an on-call duty as a judge. So, crime doesn't happen between the hours of 9 and 5, for instance. A lot of it happens when you least want it to happen. And what that meant for years and years and years is somebody woke you up in the middle of the night. And I've had in my living room, sitting around my dining room table, I think at one point in time I counted 7 different law enforcement agencies in the middle of the night between 2 and 6 o'clock in the morning sitting around my dining room table. And they needed warrants, they needed whatever. So that hasn't changed. What has changed now is the process by which we do that. And we've done this through what we call e-warrant, and it is a secure service and system by which law enforcement will submit an approved warrant to us. It could be a search warrant, could be an arrest warrant, could whatever it is, in any context, criminal, civil, family, any context in that regard. We can review it. I still have to read it, still have to get up in the middle of the night, but I just wander in my robe to my den and turn on my computer and look at it. So for me, it's a lot more convenient, it's a lot more secure, and I can sign it. The truth is, if that were the only piece of this puzzle, I never would have done it. Never would have done it. I did it for a different reason. My motivation for this is that I've got a highway patrol officer, and he's investigating a DUI in the middle of the night because somebody ran over 3 pedestrians at Bike Week. You can look at this person, you can see that they're drunk, but he's afraid that he can't get their blood in time to test it, right? You've got a really narrow window to get an accurate blood alcohol level, and he wants to prosecute this case. So he's got to get someone to stay with the defendants, because if he doesn't, what's going to happen to the defendants? Yeah, they're gone, right? So he's got to get someone to stay with the defendants, he's got to prepare a warrant, and he's got to drive to the on-call judge. Bless his heart, suppose the on-call judge is Judge Clayton, who lives on the other side of the moon. He lives over in DeLand somewhere, right? Right, so this guy's now got a 40-minute drive to get the warrant signed, and now he's got to drive it back just to execute on it. He was my motivation, or she was my motivation for this. So now they can do this from their car, right from their car. Within minutes, I have it on my desk, my desktop. I can sign it, and they can go on with business. If it's not right, if it's not appropriate, I don't sign it. No different than what it was before. But now, they've got the tools to do their job. And we have this county-wide, and we have it in every county in our circuit. That was the direct effect of the technology that we implemented to look at the files. Without that technology, without being able to see the file electronically, we could never have gotten e-warrants, which was our important component of that system. All right, so remember I showed you and we talked about the mortgage foreclosure crisis, right? So little old Flagler County, ground zero in the whole United States for the number of foreclosures per capita. It was unbelievable, having gone through it, unbelievable. Something else happened that was, I can tell you as a lawyer for 30 years, was completely unexpected. And that is that banks, by the truckload, filed their foreclosure actions in your courthouse and walked away. They're filed. That's all we need to do, they're filed. Right? And so what was 100 this month became 200 next month, and 500 the next month, and etc., without them moving, without them asking for a hearing. Right? So up to that point in time, again, as a civil lawyer, I can tell you that there was somebody in that civil case that wanted to get paid. Right? Whether it was a contingent fee or an hourly fee or whatever, they had an interest in keeping their client happy and moving the case forward because they wanted to get paid. That all fell apart in the foreclosure crisis. To this day, I don't know why. But it stopped. And so two things came out of the foreclosure crisis. Number one is we needed a better, more efficient way of handling volumes of pleadings. Literally, the number of foreclosures and filings that we had, if you put them in a box, each month wouldn't fit in this room. Okay? They were unbelievable. You would go, over and over and over and over going through them. They had a thing where we would sign a one-paragraph order that allowed a process server to serve the complaint. We would spend an entire day. I can sign my name faster than anybody in this room. I'm here to bet you. But we would spend an entire day signing those orders. We would sign them by the hundreds just to get the cases moving, get them moving forward. And of course, you got your hearings during the day. When did we do this? We did this in the evenings or first thing in the morning or whatever. We would have all of this. So we needed a better, more efficient way of doing that. Technology. And then we needed to make sure that the cases were getting addressed. How do you do that? Case managers. So we have case managers in every other division. We didn't have them in civil. Now we do. We have case managers in our civil divisions, and it all relates back to that foreclosure crisis. Now, so we were able to address those issues, to move those cases forward. The numbers ultimately subsided. It was important to us to address each case, though, because behind the for sale sign is there's a family that's not there anymore, which means their lawn's not getting mowed, and their house isn't getting painted, and there are people that are breaking into the house from the back, and their pool's not being cleaned, and all of that other stuff. So we needed to keep those cases moving forward, and we did that through our technology. Now, let's all go to the big issue here. This is the elephant in the room. So COVID comes along. And what happens? Supreme Court, we all have a boss, right? That's my boss. My boss is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And under that, it's going to be Judge Leah Case, who I'm going to be waxing her car as soon as we're done here. So the Supreme Court said, you're out of business. Perkins, close up shop, you're out of business. And they shut us down for about 2 months. Shut us down. And what I could do, we attempted to do, like hearings, and then we went to the Zoom technology. You're all familiar with that now. And we did that as a substitute for in-person proceedings. So we adopted Zoom, and then we started looking at all of our files electronically. Sound familiar? We had been doing that for years already, thankfully. And as a result, in very short order, and before almost any other agency or portion of the state was up and running, we were up and running. I'm here to tell you that little old Flagler County up there, we were the first county to do a jury trial after COVID hit. Right? Down in South Florida, they were talking about, you're going to remember this, they were talking about infection rates in 35, 40%. That means you bring 100 jurors into the building, 40 of them had COVID. Right? And they didn't know it because most of them did not have the symptoms. They just had the virus to spread it to everybody else. Right? We didn't know. Flagler County, 2.5%. Not 40%. That wasn't anything we did, but at least we were in a position where we could respond to those favorable numbers and the unfavorable numbers. So we were able to conduct business. We did it electronically, as I've indicated, by looking at the files, entering the orders, doing everything that we needed to do. So I can tell you that we were required to do social distancing. You remember all that, right? So I stood at the end of a tape measure for days with my bailiff, measuring out in our courtroom and putting down little number stickers about where people could sit, where they couldn't sit, even out in the hallway. It was all done that way, so everybody knew where they could sit. Judge Case was indicating about how we welcome our jury. It's one of the things I look forward to every week as I go down and I welcome my fellow citizens to their courthouse. It's their courthouse. I happen to work there and it's a beautiful place, but it's theirs. So it's really a pleasure to welcome people to that. And I would always give them this big rah-rah speech about how we're about to pick a jury, about how these veterans that we introduced, how they were willing to put their life on the line for the exercise of the rights we're about to exercise, those very rights, about how in the courthouse we actually talk about and find truth and justice and fairness and all these other things that get bandied about in other circumstances. That's what we do. That's our stock and trade right here in the courthouse. That's what we do. And it's such a pleasure to be able to do that. But socially distanced, that's what it looked like. How do you do business that way? It's crazy. We had to stop giving the rah-rah speech. We had to then turn to, I started meeting every week with the health department. We're on a first name basis with the health director, right? I never thought in my life I'd be on a first name basis with the health director. We met every week. Why? Because we wanted to know what our community numbers were. I didn't care what they were in Tallahassee. I didn't care what they were in Miami. I wanted to know what they were in Daytona Beach so that I could make wise decisions about whether or not we're going to bring jurors in. We had to cancel them, and doing it. So that's how we did it. We did it one case at a time. We did it using the technology that we had developed over years. We had been using the technology, the Zoom technology, to do first appearances in Flagler County for about 4 years by that point in time. We were pretty good at it. So we just adapted that from just using it on weekends for appearance from the jail to being able to have attorneys coming from various locations remotely and attending their hearings remotely. To this day, in civil divisions, most of the hearings are conducted remotely. I have currently pending, in fact, I've been working this week feverishly because the governor recently signed a death warrant. That death warrant involved a Flagler citizen. That death warrant comes to my desk. So all of the hearings that we're conducting that lead up to that in a short, very, very abbreviated short period of time, every hearing has been conducted remotely. How can we do that? Back to the court technology. So for the same reason that we were successful in developing the technology, we were successful in addressing COVID, getting back to business, getting back to what our fellow citizens expect, which is we're not only resolving the cases that came in a year ago or a month ago, we're getting ready and putting ourselves in a position to resolve those cases that are gonna come in tomorrow. Because we know they're gonna come in. There's gonna be 127,000 or more coming in between now and this time next year. We need to be in a position to do that. One other thing I wanted to address before I open it up for questions, and that is that we're always looking at our court facilities. So from my perspective, the two most important things are, number one, safety. I want to know, so every place I go in the courthouse, I got a bailiff. Big guy, doesn't have to be a big guy. Judge France has a female bailiff. The truth is, she doesn't have to be that big either, because they got a big gun strapped right here on their side, right? No one's gonna mess with them. They follow us everywhere we go. I'm not worried a bit about my safety, at least not while I'm in the courthouse. I'm worried about your safety. I'm worried about the court reporter that we get into the courthouse, about her safety. I'm worried about the clerk that's sitting right up there in front of me, because my bailiff's gonna get me out of the courtroom if things go bad. What about the clerk that's left in there? What about the jurors that are sitting there and everybody else? Those are the people I'm worried about. So how do we address that? We look at that safety all the time. And we look at our plant, our physical facilities, and decide, can we provide that level of safety? We're always in discussions. We are in discussions currently about those issues and how can we best manage our facilities, upgrade our facilities to maintain that efficiency. The second thing is, and this ties in with everything else I've been talking about, you I think understand now how important the technology is now. We can't go back. We can't go back to the paper system that we once had. We're required to move forward with our technology. If any of you are living somewhere where the wiring is more than 40 years old, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's really hard to develop the latest technology when the wiring and the infrastructure won't support it. It's way, way more expensive than it should be, and it's much more difficult. We have some of those issues. We're trying to address those. We're doing it courtroom by courtroom, courthouse by courthouse as we go. We're getting better at it, but we're always in those discussions. You may hear something about those discussions coming up in the foreseeable future. There were some discussions about maybe having that discussion here at this meeting, but the timing just didn't work out for us. So I'm sorry that I couldn't give you more information on that, but I do want you to know that we're talking about those issues. Again, safety and efficiency, that's what it's all about from our perspective. One other thing I'm going to say before I open it up for questions, and that is that I'm also, like Judge Case, a graduate of Seabreeze High School and then on up to the University of Florida. But when I was in high school, my mom, who was a war bride, she was a member of this organization. She was not political. She didn't care if you were Democrat, Republican, Independent, she didn't care. What she did believe in, coming from the UK, was providing reliable information to voters. Everybody should make an informed decision, that democracy is not easy, and that organizations have to help individuals get information that they need to make important decisions. And she thought that this was the organization to do that. And she was committed to that principle. I saw her do it. I saw her talking with people and organizing meetings just exactly like this. And I want to tell you how flattered I am to be here. All right, questions? Oh, come on, we covered a lot. Yes, ma'am.
I read the newspaper, and this isn't relating specifically to your court, but I read that the legislature wants to pass gun laws and open carry and that. Do the judges and do the court systems at least give input into these issues that are confronting you all?
So the question is, we read about the legislature taking up issues that may affect public safety, like open carry and gun laws and things of that nature. Do the judges have input into that decision making? So I think, at least from my perspective, the simple answer is no, none of it. That being said, some of our legislators are attorneys. I've known them for years, like Tom Leek, for instance. Tom Leek is a really smart, intelligent guy. I've known him a long, long time. Tom doesn't ask me about all the decisions he has to make. And the truth is, I don't have time for Tom to ask me all the decisions he needs to make, nor does he. We get to comment through our conference of circuit judges, I think, more after the fact, and more on issues that relate directly to the management of the court system. But when I'm always telling the jurors, when they come in for us, and at some point in time in a case, I'm instructing the jurors on what the law is. The jurors are gonna find out, they determine what the facts of a case are. And then I tell them what the law is, and that makes sense, right? I've been a lawyer a long time. And so they then apply the law to the facts as they find them. And then they answer some questions, and those questions are called a verdict, right? So they sign the verdict at the end after they've answered the questions. So what I tell them is, we apply the law in the courthouse. That's what we do. We apply the law. We don't get to choose what law. We don't get to pick and choose. We apply all laws equally. That's what we do. I don't have a favorite law or anything like that. They're all applied equally, and we don't get to change the law. Even if I wish it were different, I don't get to change it. I get to apply the law. So I took the job with that understanding, and it hasn't changed in that regard. But the direct answer to your question is no, they don't ask us about that. Judge Case, anything you wanted to add?
A lot of times, we're asked about it, by citizens, we're not allowed to give our opinion. Because that could be looked at as commenting on a case that might come in front of us. So, if I'm out and about and friends or anything will say, what do you think about this or that? And I can't say. Just like we're not allowed to tell you what political party we belong to, there's very strict rules about what we can say. So we can't go, I've known Tom for a long time, he's my age, so we grew up together. I can't go up to Tom and say, Tom did it like a normal citizen. Because of my position, I'm not allowed to do it. I can only talk to them through this conference of judges collectively about court issues, right?
Right. And it's a good question, particularly on things that directly affect the court system.
Because it's safety for
But-
the courts.
Right. I understand. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me how jurors are called in Florida? For example, in Texas, I think if you're over the age of 90, they call and talk to you.
Right. So Florida, it's 70, by the way. So if you're over 70 and you're called in, and we get people over 70 all of the time. And if I know that, a lot of times I don't unless they tell me. But if they're over 70 and they don't wish to serve, we will automatically release them. Most of the time, and I'm proud to say this, most of the time, if I know and ask them, they'll say, no, I want to serve. I'm here to serve. And so it kind of gives me a warm place in my heart about that's what they want to do. But the way jurors are called is they're done randomly. And it's done by the clerk's office. And you'll receive a summons, and it's mailed out. The system keeps getting better. Like, for instance, we now have the ability to load email addresses and correspond with you by email if we want you to come at a certain date or time, or change it to another date or time. So we're getting really good at that as well, getting a lot better. But it's done randomly. And then when you're summoned, you come in, again, randomly, and you're chosen randomly for the various proceedings that we may have. We've changed things but because of COVID, significantly in this respect. So let's assume that I have 4 trials, and I'm going to be picking, they're not capital cases, so they're going to be 6-person juries in that regard, okay? So in order to get a 6-person jury, in most cases, because the attorneys can strike up to 5 each and things of that nature. In order to get a 6-person jury, I know I need to bring probably 25 people through the door. In order for me to get 25 people through the door, I'm gonna have to summons probably 50.
We run about 54% yield.
Yeah,
on average.
so 45 or so.
How is it in her system?
You want me to,
Is it through property?
I can tell you.
Yeah.
It's by.
Driver's license.
Yeah, it's by statute, and so there's the DMV, the State Driver's License Agency, they give a download, it's up to them to break out, because you can have people living right on that line between what county is what, so they are tasked to provide clerks with a download. I know it's at least once yearly, I believe they're supposed to twice, that gets debatable, but it's once or twice a year we get this fresh download from them, only that often. And then it feeds into our system that we purchased and programmed, et cetera, and that is it's a random system that pulls them from that database. It used to be by voter registration. It switched to driver's license quite a while ago, about 10 years ago, I think. Used to be by voters registration, and the yield, it only being about half, that was not giving us enough people. So they expanded it to everyone with a driver's license.
Right.
Yes.
A
And you
big
can be
difference
added, if
in
you
group.
don't, there is a mechanism in the statutes, if you know somebody doesn't have a driver's license or state ID, by the way. But, if someone does not have that for some reason, you can actually submit yourself as being interested in serving on a jury to my office, and then we'll manually add you to the hopper. Yeah.
Did that answer the question? Okay, great.
The League of Women Voters has been very, very supportive of Amendment 4, which was restoration of rights for felons, and determining the fees. Now, I understand there's restitution, then there were court costs. And I wanted to ask, and I think it'd be Ms. Roth to speak to tracking and availability of information on the fees and fines. We've had difficulty determining what that is, especially if there was somebody that might cross jurisdictions, and how that's managed, and then sometimes the amount of the fines themselves that a felon might be hit with. Almost impossible for them to retire when they're, anyway, I just wanted to speak to that.
They vary greatly. So, for instance, there in Volusia County, I believe, imposes a law library fee or something to that effect as part of the felony cost that a convicted felon is required to pay. Flagler doesn't, St. John's doesn't. So their numbers are gonna be different just because of that. That's one example. There's probably 80 different fees that may be assessed in certain cases, but not in others, depending on location. And some of it is discretionary with the judge. So the judge may impose these fees in that case, but not in another case. Everything we do is recorded. It's reduced to writing. So if someone's having a hard time trying to figure out what the fees are, they're not looking in the right spot, because it's there, and it's down to the penny.
Would it be separate? Would it be a different report from Flagler versus Volusia? They
Yes.
have to go to each jurisdiction to
Yes.
get
Yes.
that?
Absolutely.
That's
Okay.
what it is.
And they can be, again, they can be substantial, and an ability of a felon to then get a job and retire those fees, another issue.
Can be
Yes.
very tough, very tough.
Right, and again, in Florida, if they don't pay the fees, the clerk's office has the right to suspend their driver's license, so they can apply for that. You know, if you go to the bank and you get a loan and you can't repay the loan, they can't suspend your driver's license. They can try to get your house or car or whatever, but they can't suspend your driver's license. The clerk can, they have a special right in doing that, and so that can complicate the process. It also gives a clerk a bigger hammer to actually try to recover some of those fees.
And my concern is the ability of the person to repay the
To ever
fee.
clear.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, but
And my concern is there any way, because I was part of the league, we had a postal program that we started, mailing postcards to all of these ex-prisoners that we had in Melbourne, Cocoa, somewhere in DeLand, I remember the one side, 50 each. And I thought to myself, I'm sending this postcard out to them, telling them, find out if you can, reinstate your vote. And I'm saying to myself, is there any central place they can go on your website to find out what they owe?
it's, Okay, let me, if I could speak to it really quick. The best thing you can advise, because I actually got really involved in this, I'm sorry, I've done workshops. We did workshops when the laws first came out about reinstatement. I threw this big fancy workshop. If I'm honest, one of the difficult things about it, I had 6 attorneys with computers ready to file motions getting those fees waived, because the statutes also gave the judges the ability to say, look, it's complicated, you've done what you've done, we're gonna call it a day, and let them go so that they could have the right to reinstate. The problem was, I had 6 attorneys there at this big festival and everything, and how many convicted felons do you think came to my workshop? Does anybody wanna guess? 0. Not one person showed up. And this was at a Martin Luther King Day festival, so it was a friendly atmosphere. We were gonna help them file the motions.
But I mean, is there any place online?
Well, let me get some more practical. I just wanted to tell you that experience to say, I'm really sorry, but some of this problem is the systemic problem. They are people that it is confusing, they're not comfortable talking to different official people. Here I have my seal on my thing, there's fear.
They've been locked up for years.
You've got all that to deal with in this matter, because we tried to make it easy, oh my God. Now, if you have somebody that could actually do the work, or somebody could come alongside and help them, your best place to start, I'm sorry this is not as easy as the website, that would be nice. We have a great website, ton of information. When it comes to money, don't go there, because it's so complicated. The best thing is to get the clerk on the phone. You call the clerk's office, you will wait, because I am short-staffed. You will finally get someone, and they will pull up the case and walk through everything. One of the reasons it's not as streamlined as you'd like it to be, we all regret this, is that there's different things they're assessed. It's not just fines, fees, and court costs. The clerk will have in each county, if they have 3 cases in 3 different counties, you're gonna call the clerk each county one by one, find out what the amount is for each case. I'm sorry, it's the easiest way to do it. One of the problems is, though, for years and years and years, judges have been able to order restitution. And they've been able to say that restitution, though, the clerk's not set up to handle, I take it in, I go find you and hand you this check. Please, if I had the funding for that, God help us. We don't have that function. We're not tasked with doing that. Nobody took care of that in the statutes. It just says the judge can order restitution. So they generally, not their fault, but they generally order, if you owe her, they order you pay her. Well, now who tracked that? So now the felony bill comes along, the restoration of voter rights. Everything has to be paid in this case. You have to prove you paid all the costs, prove you paid all the fines, prove you paid your probation costs. That's another entity. I don't have that. Restitution. How am I ever going to know did she pay you or not? That's the biggest breakdown. Nobody could ever really confidently say, the clerk can only tell you, and they should be able to accurately, the cost, fees, fines. They may or may not have any record of whether restitution was ever paid. They may not, we don't have any record whether they finished. It also requires not just that they pay all this stuff, but that they finish their sentence and finished all the probationary sentences. Where's that? Once the case is over, probation and the Department of Corrections, they don't file something back in the case saying, hey, by the way, just so you guys know, they did a great job and we released them yesterday and they finished their sentence. They don't have any obligation to let the case file know what happened. So I can't always be the one that answers, did they finish their case? We tried to coordinate with people and called them. We called probation and the DOC on some of these cases. If they were old enough, because these are a lot of old cases, they would say, I'm sorry, we don't have those records anymore. They couldn't even tell us if they had finished their. It's complicated.
That gentleman back here.
Oh, sorry,
We'll get-
was that a spin on?
Do all of the district courts have the same access to your files in the technology as, so it's reciprocal?
Makes sense to me, but no. No, unfortunately, and not all the judges have the same technology. Like, our technology in Flagler is better than our technology here in Volusia. So, we're
That's his
working on it.
opinion. Her opinion. No, they are different though. We built our own system in-house. And actually when the National Center for State Courts, Judge Perkins came and studied all the systems, they actually wrote up our in-house built one is the best in the state. I'll have you know. But because they don't, but I know what he means. The reason it works better in Flagler is because they were able to take the same system as the underlying system and build their judicial viewer on top of it, same vendor. So it acts better. Ours was a home-built system that you now have to lay a vendor on top of ours, so it's a little clunkier.
How are we doing on time? We okay on time? Yes.
Back to returning citizens for a minute. So let's say a returning citizen thinks that they've paid everything and they registered to vote and they're going to vote. How is that cross-referenced back to the documentation in the court? And particularly if it's across counties and like you say, restitution and fees and all, how does that happen?
It's the, do you want me to do it? It's the, it got, when all this was melting down, it got tasked upon the supervisors of elections. There's a check that goes on the back. So, like, let's say they filled it out, they came to us, paid off everything. Sometimes people want a letter. We'll give them one that's not required. But they attest to that they've completed everything and everything's paid. That goes up to the state supervisor. I guess they have an administrative office that's at the state level that services all of the supervisors of elections. They then search all the different databases, the FCIC, NCIC, FIBERS, NIBERS. There's these different databases and pull case information, and they try to verify it, from what I understand.
So let me share with you, it's one of my pet peeves actually that you're bringing up, and that is that Judge Case and I get, sorry. Oh, is that better? Judge Case and I get, I think it's once a month, and maybe a little later than that, we get a listing that is released by the Department of Corrections. And it tells Judge Case and I all of the felons that we sent to prison that were released. And the thing that really bothers me about it is that we get this list about 3 to 6 weeks after they're released. Like, really? You can't tell me before you're gonna release them? You know, but I'd like to let my wife know that we may have visitors for dinner. So the same system that we're talking about with regard to those that are meeting their obligations following their sentence and returning, having their rights restored, is the same, is that system that we're talking about. So I'm usually the last to know when somebody is complete. Like, I put them on probation. You know, you're gonna go to jail and then probation, or maybe just probation. I'm the last to know. I tell you what I get more notice of. So if you put someone, let's say I've got someone, and unfortunately this happens in a disturbing number of cases, is someone will be picked up for unlawful possession of a controlled substance, right? They had fentanyl. And it was a small quantity. It was probably for their own personal use. They get arrested. It's a third-degree felony. It's punishable by up to 5 years. It may be their first offense. It may be their 10th offense. We're probably not sending them to prison. They don't score prison. We're probably not sending them there. Maybe jail, but almost always at least some element of probation. What I get is not a letter from probation that tells me so-and-so has successfully completed their probation. You know, they're an extraordinary probationer. They ought to get a certificate. I don't get that ever. I never do I get that. What I get is I get the death certificate. So-and-so died of an overdose yesterday, and so we're dismissing their probation. They've successfully completed their probation because, yes, they're dead. That's it. And that's the conversation I have with my drug court. I happen to be the drug court judge too in Flagler. That's every time I get one of those, I share it with them. Remember so-and-so? Not here anymore. So, same system, we can get the notification.
Yes, I understand you have digitized forward the process that you have, but what about all those files that go back?
Thanks to this lady right here, I think we go back on every file to 2006.
Oh, no, earlier than that, depending on the division. Yeah, we had been digitizing long before the judges switched to using the digital court record. Thank
Those
goodness.
are searchable?
Yeah, we've got a lot online. I didn't, because that wasn't the focus of today's meeting, but, you know, if I usually come speak, we can do a whole thing just on clerk.org. So www.clerk.org. We have over 100 million digitized images. Now, some of those are confidential. Those could be in, like, child abuse cases you can't see, but anything you can see by law, we have online. You can search by name. You can look up your neighbors, see if they've had a case. I mean,
Is there a felon that may be searching their, you know,
Their own
ability?
records.
Can they access those files?
Yes.
Absolutely. And almost all clerks, I mean, like, you saw a weird funding model, so it's strange, but most I wanna say all of them now have most clerks have all records online, and all clerks at least have some records online. Some of us are more aggressive than others.
Right,
Yeah.
not all clerks are as current as the clerk in Volusia.
Yeah, we got lucky.
But all of them are trying to be. And I think with some level of confidence, probably early 2000s, we can go back and say everything's digitized from that point forward. But I can tell you, I was describing earlier the death warrant that was just signed. And that we were having to do things on that warrant. So it's important, critically important, that I be able to see every single thing in that file. And the Supreme Court is gonna wanna know that I did when they're looking at my order in a few days. So, and I can tell you that even though it's a 1990 file, that everything in that file was digitized. And I looked.
Yeah, we're deep.
Yep, yep.
Well, it looks like we're wrapping things up.
One more question, and then we'll
sorry.
end.
You mentioned the special courts, the drug court and the veterans court. Is there a jury there? Is it just the judge who decides?
Just a judge.
Just a
You
judge?
plea into those courts.
Are there opposing attorneys?
So the participant has to plea in. So what'll typically happen is we'll have a pre-meeting before we do our drug court session, where we have the state attorney there, the public defenders there, we have the treatment counselors are there, probation is there. I mean, we have a big group, and we'll look at everyone that may be a candidate for drug court. And that comes primarily from the public defender and the state attorney. They're looking at their cases thinking, this person that we just talked about that has, one charge of unlawful possession of a controlled substance, maybe what we'll do is we'll run them through drug court, and if they're successful at drug court, we'll dismiss the charge. So they'll have no criminal record. Everyone makes mistakes. Let's see if we can bring them back. And so if we decide that that would be an appropriate candidate to bring in, then the state and the public defender would meet with their client. The client would decide whether they want to come in. They would then go through an orientation session so that they know what they're signing up for. And if they want to do it, then I take their plea right there in open court, and they start their drug court right then and there. Many times they're in custody right then, so they're released that very day. They meet immediately with probation, then they go to the drug court coordinator to go through the orientation, and then they go to their first treatment session. So I mean, we keep busy all day, that very first day, and then treatment the next day, the next day, the next day. They're usually do random urine analysis at least 5 times a week. Sometimes for the early ones, it's 7 times a week. They get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and they meet the coordinator at 7 o'clock at the courthouse and they do urine analysis. We have a lab. I forgot to mention that. So one of the things that the chief judge has to supervise is we actually have our own drug lab. I think we have 3 of them. And so we have to staff those. We have to manage the people involved in all of that. So, all right. We done?